Good morning, Mark here, the Wicked Edge Expert Group, and I want to talk about whetstones. Last week we spoke of mediums and stones and grits, and we discussed whetstones, that they were one of those mediums. But let's get into it deeper. There's some interest in the group. Let me first say that the whetstones that I use are all regular freehand whetstones, full-size whetstones that are cut in thin strips and mounted in a particular fashion on Wicked Edge paddles. Here's an old one. This is an old Shapton stone that I've got from Bob Nash at Oldowan. This is made by Tom Blodgett from Gendy Industries. Tom was back in, when I started back in like 2015, 2016, there were Shapton whetstone combinations available at Wicked Edge website and Chosera, but they were limited. And when I looked into buying them, I found out that Tom Blodgett from Gendy was indeed cutting and making these stones for Wicked Edge that Wicked Edge was selling. So we understand that Wicked Edge makes our sharpeners and they offer stones, complete kit setups. But Wicked Edge is not really, my opinion, Wicked Edge is not really there to sell accessories. I mean, they sell cubes because you need the cubes, and they sell cut-proof clubs and some various other safety shields and things like that, but they really don't sell accessories. And I saw Clay trying at the beginning, but it's hard because it's such a specialty market. So I ended up buying my first set of stones, which was a Shapton Pro Stone, Kuramaku Pro Stones from Tom Blodgett at Gendy. And I learned to use whetstones using that particular stone. And then as my interest arose, I got a set of Shapton glass whetstones from Bob Nash at Oldowan. And again, these Shapton glass, you can see here is a Shapton glass, and you can see the Gendy stamp on them. So I know that these stones were cut or purchased this size from Shapton, but it was from Tom Blodgett at Gendy. It's a very small market. There's not a lot of people that are handling whetstones. It is, I'm talking a lot, it's a custom deal. And people like Tom make these sets, and the problem is there are so many choices and there's so many stones that are used differently. Some are soapstones, some are spritz, you just spritz them with water and you use them. Others you have to soak them in water for a few minutes ahead of time to get wet. Some are called water stones, and those stones actually sit underwater all the time. Anyway, with the whetstones, what I found was you either make them yourself or you find somebody to make them. Whetstones are expensive, and what I did after I had the Shapton glass and the Kuramaku, and I wanted to start getting into some other stones, I found a guy on eBay called Rainbow Whetstones that had some sets, and I bought a set from him, and his work was really beautiful. They're nicely cut. All the stones, as you can see, are cut, and if you can look down in here, there is a little thin aluminum plate that the stones are mounted to. And the stones are full-size whetstones that somebody is investing in and cutting with a wet tile saw, finishing them by hand on a lapping plate, mounting them with epoxy to a little thin aluminum plate, getting everything lined up nice and neat, and then affixing that onto the Wicked Edge proprietary handles and then labeling them. So if you want to do it yourself, that's the way you do it. Go buy yourself the stone you want, figure out how to cut them to size without breaking this little stone here that's about $100, just this cut portion, $100 or so, and then mount them on your paddles. If you're a do-it-yourselfer, that's the way to go. What I ended up doing was I found people that like rainbow sharpening stones that was willing to work with me, and I bought the stones that I want, and you get a full-size stone. I bought the brands that I wanted to experience and try, and he cut them into the strips, and he mounted them onto the aluminum for me. Then at one point I was affixing them myself, and I was labeling them, and then later on it was just easier to let him do it. So I paid for the stones, I paid for the handles, I paid for the materials, and we worked out a deal that he made me the stones, and he got to keep the cuts. The cuts, as you know, full-size stone, we're only cutting, you know, 2 400 grit strips, so there's some left over. So there was room for him to work for me, but it is expensive. If you want to get into this, it's $25 right now, I think, for a pair of blanks. So you're starting right away at $50, and then you have to get 2 grits. And then the stones cost whatever they cost. You can get them from Sharpening Supply or Lee Valley or Amazon, or any number of places sell all kinds of whetstones. It's up to you to get them. But then you have to learn how to cut them, and to cut these little thin strips and not break them with the wet saw. Cut them and not wedge them and break them, and then sand them smooth for mounting, and to have something that's a decent looking set. They get expensive. You might be talking $500-600 easy for a good set of stones like Shapton glass, which Shapton glass for whetstones, for Wicked Edge, are not made anymore. So these are in limited supplies and coveted, and I have collected some, hoping that someone someday will want them and we can share them. But to talk about the whetstones are used similarly to diamond stones, the same strokes, all that's the same. But whetstones are either, as I said, they're splash and go, they're a spritz stone. I use a little water bottle like this. I fill it up with filtered water. This is a little cloudy now. I'll dump this and start with fresh filtered water and a couple drops of soap just to help it to sheet out. And I just spritz as I'm sharpening, spritz both sides and sharpen. And that's why you can't see it. But the big rig with the gold fiber towel, the gold shop towel on top, that's because I work with whetstones on there to catch the spray. But to talk more about whetstones are consumable. They wear and they dish as you use them. So whetstones need to be maintained, and they can be maintained with lapping stones, and there's all kinds of lapping stones. Here's a 140 Atama diamond stone, and show you these stones. If you look at them, you can see that there's a layer on there, like it's a steel plate with the stick on. So that's how they normally come, and I believe you can get new peel and stick abrasives, but this is a 400, and this I would use for up to about a 600 grit whetstone. Here's a 140, and this is on one of those whetstone bases, these inexpensive bases, so that it sits flat when you use it. It won't roll. It's got the stone rubber base. And the 140 I would use for like a 220 whetstone up to 320 maybe. And then there, you know, I started with the 1200 Atamo, and I was also using that for up to I don't know, 2000 grit stones. There's also these not to get too far, but there's these Diasharp by DMT. This one's 600 grit, and it looks like steel, and it doesn't feel like anything to me. And this one is a 1200, and it looks just like a steel plate. So I didn't like the Diasharp stones, diamond stones, for lapping my whetstones. That I just didn't have any abrasive to it. My preferred or go-to stones for whetstones are the Shaftons, and they have one that is just this steel plate, and this is a machined steel plate. Yeah, this is a Shafton, and they come with various, I think it's silicon oxide or something, that you sprinkle on here and you wet it and you work your stones to lap them. So this is one kind. This is what I use for the coarser stones. And then for the finer stones, I like this Shafton glass diamond lapping stone. And you can see it is on glass, and there is metal embedded with diamonds in here. And this one I use for everything from 600 grit up. All my whetstones, even though it's a Shafton glass diamond, it works particularly well with the Shafton glass stones, but it works well for everything. But this sucker here is about, I've seen them from $375 down to, I think, $279 is the best price I saw at Lee Valley for you guys looking for that. Now this is a full-size lapping stone, and we're going to get into lapping stones when we get into it more. I will show you how I lap. Just to say, I like to lap my stones more frequently than less. I think that you get more life out of your stone if you just keep them flat, as opposed to getting a big dish in there and then taking all that stone down to get it level. There is a newer one, this little glass diamond stone, which is pretty good size, and it'll do everything. I bought this to try it, and it works okay. I like the bigger one. You got more room to move around and lean on it. It's a more efficient stone to use, but this little one is less expensive. It's a glass stone 7. It's meant for the little 7 series Shafton glass diamond stones. Anyway, that said, when you buy whetstones, you can go with the system, which is what I did. And that's the problem for the whetstones and the whetstone makers, is there's so many different whetstones and so many different grits, and there's so many different choices of whetstones, and that the combination becomes endless, and it becomes a custom build sort of situation. And then the other thing is, like I found, I'm talking on and on, but the other thing is that I found is, who knows which whetstone to use, and then it gets expensive when you want to try them. Thus, we came to this, because I wanted to try the different ones. I have Shafton Glass, Shafton Pro, Nanoa Professional, which replaces this is very important, the Nanoa Professional replaces the old Chaucera. The old original Chaucera soakstone has now been replaced by Nanoa Professional Stone, which is a spritz and go stone. And it's a super stone. I love it. Then there's a Nanoa Super 2, and I have a Suhira Debato SNE. I have Nubatama Platinum. I got those from the late Ken Schwartz. I have Suhira Gokumyo, I think I got that from Ken. I have a Suhira Rika set. Odo are natural stones. Those are very cool. If I can find them. I don't see it. It's here somewhere. Anyway, Aoto, AOTO is a natural stone. I think it's like a 3,000 grit. I have an inexpensive set, Yoshihiro Toshi, and then I have a Nanawa Hibiki, which is a Japanese stone that's meant for super hard tool steels that I played with. Anyway, the point is that you can make a whole science out of it, out of your strokes, out of your mix and match. So it becomes a big market, specialty market. And I don't know anybody making the stones anymore. We had Bob Nash that was assembling them, I think. I believe Tom Blodgett was cutting stones for Tom Nash of Voldewan Tools. Tom was selling his own at Gendy. Gendy is still in business. Gendy is distributing through Russell, our friend Russell at Zanvac, that has both the Asian, Australian, Asian down under distributor and now a U.S. distributorship. I understand ships internationally. He's the legal licensed registered dealer for Wicked Edge around the world. So we have all these stones, but they're custom and nobody makes them. So here's the dilemma. You either buy them and cut them yourself. You get, you reap your rewards. You either cut a good stone. It takes some doing. The problem is they're expensive. You start cutting them, you're going to be breaking the sticks. It's like little, thin ceramic. There's not any give to it, and they're very thin. Let me get into this deeper. These big stones, this is me. I worked with people. I described how I wanted them cut, the thickness, because I figured if I'm commissioning people to make stones for me, I'm paying for the handles, the aluminum, the epoxy, just for instance, I'm paying for all the materials, and all he's doing is cutting them and assembling, but he gets to keep the rest of the stones to make his own. So I paid for the materials to start with, and I was happy because for me, if I want to use a Shapton glass stone in a 500 grit, I have to buy a stone. If I want to use the 1,000 grit, I buy a full stone. So I was okay with buying all the stones, and the guy was okay with cutting them and mounting them for me. So while I was doing it, we worked up these thicknesses. That's a point I want to make. Here is a brand new, never used Shapton 500 glass, and here's a used one. You can see how it's thinner, but this is 8 years old and it still has a lot of light. So as I was commissioning, I got into this thicker stuff. Tom Blodgett said something to me about my thick stones, and that's where that comes from. I figure if I'm going to spend the money to make it and have someone build it, I'm going to get something that's going to last a very long time. And these are expensive whetstones, and when you're working with the cube, I have a non-magnetic stone adapter that clips right onto these, and then my cube fits up to here. So I have consumable stones that we're using and lapping. They're getting smaller. The softer grits wear more than the harder grit. So it's a very variable thing. There's different thickness stones. So we always work with the cube with a non-magnetic stone holder. So the process is involved. It's a lot of work. And you're working with consumable, maintainable stones that you can drop and break, and they're expensive. So it's a very special thing to get into. And that will lead into a conversation we'll have later about using other stones with Wicked Edge besides Wicked Edge proprietary stones, because the same thing with the whetstones, with the price, with the variety and whatever, it just is, it's endless. And there's a lot of other mediums out there that are the 4-inch and the 1x6 and whatever. And we talked about that some earlier, and we'll talk more. But for whetstones, those guys that are wanting to know how you get them, You can order them from Gendy, Tom Blodgett at Gendy, Sandvac. He can make them for you. The variety, I'm trying to work on that. I'm hoping with this group, with interest, with feedback, and maybe we can get Russell and Tom to make a set that, or offer some options for Wicked Edge users, because it's so special, because it's so expensive, because it's so limited portion of the guided sharpening system. The Whetstones for Wicked Edge have never really caught on, and I am a proponent of using them, because for your hard steels more than like HRC 60, they really excel. And when you get into the real chippy steels, maybe Maximed and SV90 or ZDP, is that right? 189. When you get into those super chippy, the Whetstones really help you to sharpen well. So I hope I introduced you some to Mr. Marv. Anything you want to know about this, just comment or fire me a chat, and we'll go from there. Thanks.